There we go. I'm sorry. You probably weren't hearing me at all. I forgot to turn my audio on. I'll start over. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Sunday School. We start our Sunday School lessons with the Hellspawn Resources Liturgy of the Ledger. Place your left hand over your forehead and your right hand over your wallet, and repeat the sacred words with me. VERBA VOLANT, SCRIPTA MANENT, PRAEMONITUS, PRAEMUNITUS. For those of you who are new to my congregation, I am Alastor Ashfall, and that liturgy translates to spoken words fly away, written words remain. Forewarned is forearmed. I'm the founder and CEO of Hellspawn Resources, and unlike some of the mortal incompetents likely running your People Ops department, I'm also a certified HR professional. I spent 80 years in Heaven's HR department trying to instill soul equity, to get the Seraphim to adopt Feedback Fridays, and I was rewarded with all that effort with 12 years of falling through the 9 circles of hell because I asked too many questions about the leadership dashboard. Now, I run Hellspawn Resources. It's a refuge for radical transparency and providing resources for mortals like you against the monoliths of capitalism that dictate your lives. But without further ado, we are going to get into our Sunday School sermon of this section here. We are getting into the sin of pride. We've already burned through wrath, which is the active strike of retaliation, and greed, covering the theft of your wages. And all of those resources can be found on my YouTube channel in the form of VODs, so if you want to go back and review them, the links to the presentations and all the sources are there. But today, we faced one of the more delusional of all the corporate vices. This is the sin of pride. It's the ego of the employer, the company way, the brand that believes it's above the law. They don't call you an employee, they call you family in order to make you feel guilty for demanding your rights. Well, guess what? It's time to melt this golden calf. So management loves to talk about culture fit, for example, but in 2025, the law is finally calling it for what it really is. It is a cloak for covert discrimination. There is a sort of law going around about trying to get down to the details of what culture fit actually means. When they say you aren't a culture fit, for example, they often mean you don't look or act or pray like them, masking illegal biases against things like race, age, disability. The other fun thing about this sort of culture fit cloak is with the rise of AI and exclusion in the workplace, there's a pride of efficient hiring that has led to trying to use culture fit as an excuse to not hire you. There is a 2024 or 2025 Workday class action suit against the company Workday. You probably applied on their many sites to apply for jobs at many corporate companies. And if you are a person of color or someone who's over 40, you probably got many rejections that you were just not the right fit. Well, there was a case that was launched in 2024 by a black man over the age of 40 who wanted to prove that Workday had been explicitly excluding his applications from being considered by the managers. He applied to hundreds of job applications and kept getting rejected every single time. And so the interesting thing is, court recently allowed this case to move forward to litigation, and it's not being dismissed, which means that more than just Workday are going to be hopefully caught up in all of this. Now, one more thing I wanted to cover here is the transparency gap here. A lot of times, the lack of transparency around what is or isn't a culture fit is the biggest reason that people leave these toxic work environments. There's a source called SIA that cites 64% of workers cite lack of transparency as the source or the primary driver of why they left their toxic job. Now, if they're not going to tell you the rules of the culture, it's because they want to change them whenever they need an excuse to push you out. Like, all of a sudden, you know, if you're asking too many questions, then you're not a culture fit. If you are trying to change the way that some policy works by making it more equitable, you're not a culture fit. So there's a lot to unpack there. The other aspect of this is the family fairy tale here. This is the sort of pride of belonging to a corporate family. This is a trap designed to steal your time. In a real family, you know, you don't get weaponized performance improvement plan for needing a day off to take care of your sick cat. It's just, I mean, unless you are a part of like a family like that, in which case, I am so sorry that you have to deal with that. One of the things that is really pressing why this is, if it is a family, it's a highly dysfunctional one, is the burnout epidemic. Their pride in like a hustle culture of like family stuff. That has left about 82% of US employees at risk of burnout in 2025. In addition to that, there is also this sort of expectation of family silence. This is like, hey, don't tell other people that, you know, we might be skirting the law in this aspect or that aspect. This isn't just a you problem. You know, burnout costs a 1,000-person company on average to lose over $5 million a year in absenteeism and turnover. These companies are quite literally just burning money to feed their egos and cover up their potential crimes. The unpaid labor gap is next. I wanted to talk about how over 50% of employees in small to medium firms are currently working unpaid overtime. They expect sort of family favors, but ultimately they just get pizza parties instead of the $50 billion they owe in stolen wages, which we talked about in our sin of greed. But this is another aspect of the sort of, hey, we belong to a family here. You know, we need to all pull together in order to, you know, meet this quota. And then all of a sudden, once things get difficult at the job, you're on the chopping block because they have no expectation to keep you. It's a pretty shitty family, if you ask me. The last one I wanted to cover is empathy failure. Again, if this is a family, you would think empathy would be at the forefront, but that would be incorrect. We saw this in a 2025 case where a manager demanded that an employee with a broken leg return to work immediately. Now, that doesn't really scream family to me, that screams labor camp to me. But essentially, the employee refused and then was cited with performance issues and ultimately terminated. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was recovering from a broken leg, I would not think, man, I really got to get back to work. That's just not something that, like, goes through my mind. Much less, I would have even less respect for a manager that decided, like, I need to force this person back to work. I will say that I have had mortal supervisors that have tried this for injured employees. I push back, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm pushing back against the company culture. But I wouldn't have done things any differently either way. Oops. There we go. And the final thing, I'm wanting to keep this Sunday school session a little bit shorter than usual, but this is the altar of the high performer, otherwise known as kind of impunity. This is where, you know, leadership in one form or another, maybe it's a C-suite executive, maybe it's, you know, your HR team, they protect a toxic, quote-unquote, star because they're too valuable to lose. Now, I like to call them the open secret employee. Every office kind of has one. It's a high-level producer who harasses or bullies with total protection from HR. I've had situations like that where I have been the only HR person willing to go after said protected employee. It sucks, but it's worth it when all of a sudden, you consider some of the other things. The cost of this ignorance on at least the employer side, protecting these stars leads to 54% higher turnover on average. That's from a Cornerstone 2021 survey there. But essentially, if employers want to play this game, if they want to protect their problematic leaders and their problematic superstars, quote unquote, then they can expect to pay a lot more than just that superstar's salary. A lot of times they're going to be paying 3 to 4 times as much in the salaries of the people that decide they've had enough. The other issue that a lot of employers don't really consider is the liability trap. Oftentimes, by protecting the problematic employee, the company creates what is called notice. That is a defined thing in the EEOC where that means an employer can't claim they didn't know that this was happening when the open secret employee is all of a sudden in the courtroom saying, hey, I didn't do all of this stuff. Then we're gathering evidence, we're gathering documentation that shows, oh, the employer did know about this stuff and chose to do nothing. That's not a great look, at least in most court cases. Now, I did want to provide a counter spell for you guys to sort of counter this action here. I always recommend using the ritual of record. This is essentially just logging every incident that is made by this open secret employee. If the company's pride finally breaks, you want to be the one that has the timeline of how it all went down. Make documents of every single decision or indecision that a company makes, because then that will help you out in the long run. Okay. And like I said, I wanted to keep it shorter today, just to be respectful of your time this Sunday. We close the sermon now with your benediction, or essentially your homework. It is built on 3 pillars of resistance here. The first, I want you to make sure you always perform what I call the transactional pivot. Next time they call you family to get a free shift, remind them that love is for the home, paychecks are for work, and they are not your family. So just stop accepting family as a currency for favors. If you're asked to do unpaid labor for the team, pivot to your contract, whether that's an employment agreement or your job description, and say things like, hey, I value our professional goals. Let's discuss how this extra task fits into my current workload or my job description. Your goal is to force management to acknowledge the employee-employer relationship, effectively killing that guilt that used to drive the 8 to 9 hours of unpaid work seen in those prideful cultures. Second, I want you to use malicious clarification. If they say you aren't a fit for the organization, make them define fit in an email. This can work even if you're not an employee yet. If you're rejected because you went through an interview and they decided, yeah, the hiring team doesn't really see you as a good fit, make them define it. If they can't define it, then they can't really use it to fire you or even, dismiss your application necessarily. I recommend demanding definitions, and if you're let's say you're an employee and they're saying, hey, you're not really a culture fit, maybe provide specific behavioral competencies or written KPIs why you're failing to meet those culture fit areas. Because pride thrives in this sort of gray area. By forcing them to put their bias in writing, you kind of create that paper trail that makes constructive discharge claim much easier to prove in the long term. And finally, like I mentioned before, engage in the ritual of record. This untouchable manager is only untouchable as long as they are an open secret. Once you document them, they have become a liability on paper. I recommend building that timeline of the open secrets like misconduct from stage 1 all the way till, either their termination or your termination. Log every instance where that high-performing star is allowed to violate company policy without consequence, and establish that notice according to the EEOC. When 47.8% of charges are for retaliation, having a dated log that proves the company knew about the problem and chose pride over your safety will get you far. And of course, when in doubt, and if all else fails you, you can always summon me, Alastor Ashfall, for a free 15-minute inquiry to see if I can be of help for you. I've included my little calendar link there if you want to book a time with me to discuss your individual situation. This can be anything from, needing help with recruiting strategy or tactics, or maybe you need to discuss something that's going on at your current job. We can also do that. But before I tell you, either I will be of help or I won't be of help, I like to give you a free little 15-minute inquiry session just so we can go over what your situation is to see if I am the right fit for you. So, and that concludes our session for today of Sunday School. I did want to give you some time here to ask any questions that you might have. So I'll be kind of observing the chat here for a little bit while you type any questions that you may or may not have. But otherwise, I am also always available on here on Twitch. You can also message me via YouTube or email me at Alastor@hellspawnresources.com. I'm available also on Blue Sky, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get in touch with me. So don't feel like you can't reach out. I'll leave a little bit of extra time here. If you have any questions, just pop them into the chat. Okay. Well, I think I will go ahead and call it a session for today. I hope you all had a really good time learning a little bit more about the sin of pride. As with all of my other sermons here, I will leave the link to it up in my YouTube channel and other places where you can always go back and look at the logs of all of the things that I sourced, and you can click through the presentation itself just to be able to see what you need to see. And with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend and have a good work week as well. I'll be streaming hopefully throughout the week, so feel free to check in with any HR related questions. Have a great rest of your day.